Hello, welcome to Lahore Live with Indus News and me, Usman Lone. We begin this hour in Libya. An airstrike kills 7 people and wounds 30 others in southern Tripoli. The Health Ministry says 5 foreigners were among those killed in the attack. The government accuses Khalifa Haftar's eastern Libyan forces of carrying out the strike. Haftar's Libyan National Army has been trying to take Tripoli since April. According to the United Nations, over 1,000 people have been killed since the start of the offensive. Last week, the United States urged Khalifa Haftar's forces to stop the fighting. Iran's Revolutionary Guards warn anti-government protesters of decisive action if protests over fuel prices continue. At least 2 people, including 1 police officer, have been killed during clashes over the weekend. In a statement, the Guards said they will take any action against moves to disturb the people's peace and security. Meanwhile, President Hassan Rouhani says the US is undermining Iran's security by declaring its support for the protests. Earlier, White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham said Washington supports Iranians in their peaceful protests. Germany also urged Iran to respect legitimate protests and hold talks with the demonstrators. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei backed the decision to raise fuel prices and accused foreign forces of backing the demonstrations. Well, staying with Iran, and a large number of Iranian intelligence reports with Iraqi intelligence has been leaked. Over 700 pages of secret reports are from Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security. The disclosures reveal Iran's influence in Iraq a decade after the US war there. The leaked documents from 2014 and 15 show how Iran tried to influence Iraqi politics through its intelligence network. The files show Tehran's main goal in Iraq was to prevent it from breaking up. The leaked documents also reveal how Washington and Tehran became unlikely allies in the war against ISIS. The documents show Iran benefited from the intelligence gathered by the United States' presence in Iraq. Russia says it returned 3 Ukrainian Navy ships it seized from the Kerch Strait in November last year. Ukraine has asked Moscow to return the ships as a goodwill gesture ahead of a peace summit next month in Paris. The move has opened the way for the Normandy format talks between Russia, Ukraine, France and Germany. The Kremlin confirmed Russian President Vladimir Putin will take part in the Normandy summit on December the 9th. The meeting is an attempt towards a peaceful resolution to the conflict in eastern Ukraine. On Saturday, France said major progress has been made in peace talks after troops withdrew from large parts of eastern Ukraine last week. Well, in a surprise twist of events, US President Donald Trump says he might be willing to testify in the ongoing impeachment inquiry against him. Last week, the House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi invited Trump to testify in front of investigators. Trump says even though he considers the inquiry a hoax, he will strongly consider Pelosi's suggestion. The inquiry is investigating if the president withheld aid to Ukraine in exchange for a probe into his political rival Joe Biden. Trump has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. Now, China has called on the US to stop flexing its muscles in the South China Sea and to avoid adding new uncertainties in Taiwan. At a closed-door meeting in Bangkok, China's Defense Minister Wei Feng urged his US counterpart, Mark Esper, to avoid escalating tensions in the region. Earlier, Esper accused Beijing of increasingly resorting to intimidation to advance its objectives in the region. The exchange came a day after China sailed a carrier group into the sensitive Taiwan Strait, led by its first domestically built aircraft carrier.
On the South China Sea, Minister Wei reaffirmed China's resolute determination to safeguard its territorial sovereignty and its maritime rights and interest in the South China Sea. China's resolute determination to maintaining peace and stability in the South China Sea and demands the US stop flexing its muscles in the South China Sea and do not provoke and escalate tensions in the South China Sea.
Well, for more on this story, we're joined by our correspondent in Hong Kong, Grace Lee. Grace, thank you for joining us here on Indus News. So tell us, the relationship between China and the US isn't exactly the best at the moment, and it's getting increasingly strained over this new row with Taiwan and the South China Sea. How has this been reflected by both countries' military behavior towards each other in that region, Grace?
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a contentious issue, especially as the two nations face off in this growing trade war as well. But when it comes to military might in the region, the U.S. has already said last year that China has pretty much complete control over the South China Sea. And a lot of the tensions going on there kind of point to this. The U.S. Trying some navigation expeditions there, but largely trying to stay out of China's radar when it comes to challenging China straight on. And so we're seeing them use a lot of kind of side alleyway tactics to kind of match China in its might. And that includes the big multi-billion-dollar arms sale that we saw that it engaged with Taiwan in, just to try and give Taiwan an edge when it comes to facing off with China. But it's not clear whether or not that will actually be effective, because China, as we saw in a lot of different photos and satellite images, it's completely militarized that area with its artificial islands, and the last time we checked, it's almost complete. So it'll be hard to challenge them in that region, even if Taiwan obtains some arms from the U.S., and that's pretty much worrying for Taiwan.
Grace, the US have said that China has a majority claim over the South China Sea, but Vietnam has also stepped in to claim to have a part of the South China Sea. How has this affected their relations with China?
Well, a lot of experts are pointing to Vietnam as the one to watch when it comes to challenging China. Now, Vietnam does have a history of war with China, and it does have a very aggressive military. So far, it'll take a legal case to the UN and try its hand at international law when it comes to challenging China in this region. But of course, that's something that the Philippines tried a couple of years ago. They won the court case, but not much came out of it. So it's unclear whether or not this will give them an edge when it comes to the South China Sea.
Thank you, Grace. That was Grace Lee, our correspondent in Hong Kong there. Now, China says no one should underestimate Beijing's will to safeguard its sovereignty and Hong Kong's stability. In a weekly briefing, China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang reaffirmed the country's commitment to the One China policy. More in this report. Hong Kong has been marred with violent protests since June. The unrest was triggered after the passing of a controversial extradition bill, which has since been revoked. Frequent clashes between protesters and police have become the new norm in the city. Western powers, including the United Kingdom and the United States, have thrown their weight behind the demonstrators, while China stands firmly with Hong Kong's government.
I would like to reiterate clearly that the central government of China firmly supports the chief executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region to lead the government of the Hong Kong SAR in accordance with law, firmly supports the Hong Kong police and law enforcement.
Beijing urged Western powers to stop interfering in China's internal affairs.
We urge these forces to immediately stop any form of interference in Hong Kong affairs and China's internal affairs, and immediately stop condoning violent offences. Otherwise, they would lift the stone only to drop it on their own feet.
Until 1997, Hong Kong was ruled by Britain as a colony, but then returned to China. But it has its own judiciary and a separate legal system from mainland China. The International Criminal Court says it could open an investigation into alleged war crimes committed by the British Special Forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, this comes after new evidence was shared by the Iraq Historic Allegations team. The ICC says it will begin a case if it finds the UK government has been protecting soldiers from prosecution. The formal investigation by the ICC will mark the first time it's taken action against any UK nationals for war crimes. The cases include civilian murders and mistreatment of detainees. The court has previously endorsed IHAT's report of war crimes by British troops 2 years ago. Britain's Ministry of Defence said it has cooperated fully with the ICC and sees no justification for further investigations by the court. In Afghanistan, 4 soldiers have been wounded in a suicide attack close to a military training centre in Kabul. The Interior Ministry says the suicide bomber blew himself up in Police District 19. No group yet has claimed responsibility for the attack. Last week in Kabul, 12 people, including 3 children, were killed and 20 others wounded in a blast. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi hits out at a former Indian military general for calling for the rape of Kashmiri women. In a television debate, retired Major General S.P. Sinha endorsed rape and murder as legitimate military tactics for the Indian Army. Sinha said Kashmiri women should be raped by Indians as retribution for the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. In a tweet, Alvi said people should imagine the fate of women in occupied Kashmir, where such men wield power with impunity. Quoting a Human Rights Watch report, Alvi said Indian forces have used rape as a weapon in the valley. Former Chief Minister of the Valley, Mehbooba Mufti, also condemned the comment. She said New India is baying for blood and rape. The occupying valley is suffering under a curfew and communications blackout for the last 106 days. Pakistan has successfully conducted a training launch of a new surface-to-surface ballistic missile. Military spokesperson Major General Asif Ghafoor said Shaheen-1 can deliver all types of warheads at a distance of up to 650 kilometers. He said the launch was aimed at testing the operational readiness of Pakistan's Army Strategic Forces Command. The spokesperson said the test was conducted to ensure Pakistan's credible minimum deterrence. Well, we'll be back with more news from around the world right after this short break. Hello again, it's good to have you back. Now, a delegation of South Korean Buddhists visited Lahore Museum to pay respect to ancient Buddhist relics. The 30-member delegation of the Jogye order, led by leader Ven Won Heng, arrived in Pakistan on Saturday. The Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government says the delegation will visit holy sites in Taxila, Mardan and Gilgit-Baltistan. The delegation will also meet Pakistan's President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan in Islamabad. The visit has been arranged by the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Ministry of Culture and Pakistan's embassy in South Korea in Seoul. Well, Islamabad's peace initiative, the Kartarpur Corridor, has boosted the number of Sikh pilgrims visiting holy sites in Pakistan. The Indian media reports that more pilgrims are visiting the Kartarpur shrine on weekends and religious days. According to the Indian government data, 1,800 people are scheduled to visit Kartarpur on Sunday, the 24th of November. On the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev, which was on the 12th of November, a total of 546 Indians made the trip. Gotabaya Rajapakse has been sworn in as Sri Lanka's new president. The island nation's Chief Justice Jayantha Jayasuriya administered the oath to Rajapakse at a Buddhist temple. He won Sunday's closely fought elections in the South Asian island nation. He is the first retired military officer to assume the office. Rajapakse has pledged to prioritize national security. The former defense minister appealed to Tamils and Muslims to rally around him. Minorities from about 20% of Sri Lanka's population of 22 million. Rajapakse is credited with spearheading the brutal end of the Tamil separatist war a decade ago. He was defense chief under his brother Mahinda Rajapakse's presidency from 2005 to 2015. Well, protests in Lebanon have entered their second month, though the leaderless pan-sectarian movement has managed to oust the Hariri government. Demonstrators continue to demand a complete overhaul of the ruling class. More in this report.
thousands of Lebanese citizens gathered in major cities on Sunday, demanding the formation of a temporary technocrat government. They have decried unemployment, frequent power cuts, and sectarianism that has been a constant feature of domestic politics. Most of all, they are tired of the same families dominating government institutions since the end of the 15-year civil war.
We wish that the hard work of men and women on the ground be fruitful and their demands achieved so that the Lebanese can return to their country and not be obliged to live abroad.
Meanwhile, the Lebanese economy is teetering on the brink of a collapse. Authorities have capped weekly bank withdrawals at $1,000 a week, trying to keep the local financial system from failing.
They can't stop a citizen who deposited $10,000 from withdrawing it all. It is the right of every citizen to withdraw as much money as they deposited. If they have a problem, they solve it with the central bank.
But the main problem is finding someone willing to step into the ousted government's shoes. Former Finance Minister Mohammed Safadi already turned down an offer for the Prime Minister's office, saying he wouldn't be able to form a harmonious cabinet. As such, there is no end to the unrest in sight.
President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Turkey will continue hosting Syrian refugees despite calls to send them back. More in this report.
Speaking in Istanbul, Erdogan said Ankara is trying to make the lives of Syrians better, while other countries are only pursuing their interests in the region. Turkey claims it hosts 3.6 million Syrian refugees and that it spent $40 billion on them since 2011. Earlier, Ankara accused the Kurdish People's Protection Units of releasing over 800 ISIS militants in Syria. In a statement, Turkey's defense ministry said NATO needs to realize Ankara is its only partner in Syria fighting ISIS. Last month, Turkey launched an operation in northern Syria to eliminate Kurdish militants from the area. Ankara wants to establish a safe zone in the region to pave the way for repatriation of some 2 million refugees.
In Spain, Catalan leader Quim Torra is on trial for disobedience over his failure to remove pro-independence symbols from government buildings. Torra admitted that he disobeyed Spain's electoral committee order, but shot back, saying it wasn't illegal. Spain's electoral committee ordered Torra to take down pro-independence symbols from public buildings across Catalonia prior to this year's European elections. The signs were displayed in support for separatist leaders over their role in a failed 2017 bid for Catalan independence. If found guilty, Torra can be removed from office for up to 2 years, and it would likely lead to fresh regional elections. In October, Spain's Supreme Court sentenced 9 separatist leaders to lengthy jail terms over a 2017 independence bid. Now, international observers have said the parliamentary elections in Belarus didn't comply with democratic standards. In a statement, they said Sunday's polls were marred by curbs on fundamental freedoms and concerns over procedural integrity. Official results showed that not a single opposition candidate won a seat, allowing President Alexander Lukashenko to hold on to power. All 110 elected members of parliament represent parties loyal to the president. Lukashenko has led the former Soviet state for 25 years. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Vladimir Makai said Belarus still commits to closer integration with Russia. Now, in Italy, Venice state of emergency shows no sign of lifting after the city was hit again by its third high tide in a week. The floodwater in the popular tourist city rose to 1.5 meters high. More details in this report.
Venice's St. Mark's Square is flooded and closed for tourists. Churches, shops and homes have also been inundated. Strong storms and winds have battered the Renaissance city, with storm surges putting it underwater. Since 1872, the 1.5 meter level had never been touched twice in 1 year. Now it has been hit 3 times in a week.
We had lots of damages. For example, in my case, Electrical system went underwater. A lot of merchandise got lost, necklaces and other goods, all underwater. We have to lift desks and drawers, rinse again and clean up.
The crisis has prompted the government to release $22 million to tackle the devastation. Many people have blamed the disaster on global warming as well as poor governance.
We had to blame certain politicians of the past. Unfortunately, we pay the consequences. This is the problem.
The local meteorological department says more rain is expected in Venice in the coming week, but tides and weather conditions will ease.
Now, if like millions of others you're a fan of Leonardo da Vinci's classic painting, the Mona Lisa, you may soon have a chance to own your own cut-price version of the portrait. A 17th century replica of da Vinci's masterpiece is up for sale at Sotheby's auction house in Paris. Find out if you can afford it in this report.
Painted on canvas rather than poplar panel like the original, this Mona Lisa is one of the 150 copies made between 16th and 19th century. Unlike Leonardo's famous work, the copy has columns on either side of the central figure and is slightly larger. Estimated to sell between $77,000 and $99,000 US on November 19th, the duplicate is more affordable than the original. The current owner, Wim Delvoye, bought it for $38,500 US in 2010.
You can never come up closer unless you're very, very privileged. So this is maybe a way of actually looking at her without all the big bomb case and people in front of her taking selfies.
Famous artists like Titian and Rembrandt used to copy paintings to practice different techniques and train their eyes.
They were all copying, and because it was teaching them to closely look at masterworks and how other artists before them were doing their work.
Another copy of the Mona Lisa in New York was sold for $1.6 million in January.
In the Czech Republic, people have celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Velvet Revolution. The Velvet Revolution marks the day when communist rule in Czechoslovakia crumbled weeks after the fall of the iconic Berlin Wall. Find out more about the anniversary in this report.
Camouflaged in exciting costumes, thousands of people marched in the streets of Prague as the country celebrates 30 years of democracy. Marchers played music and flew insect balloons alongside the Charles Bridge during the Velvet Fun Festival. The event offered Czechs more of a party with unseasonably warm weather.
Here we have 13 groups and each of them are reflecting some of hot Czech themes, with humor and satire of course.
The festivities took place a day after 200,000 people rallied against Prime Minister Andrej Babiš and President Miloš Zeman. Protesters demanded that Babiš step down over concerns the pair are chipping away at democracy in a nation of 10.7 million people.
We are here because we don't agree with the politics our top representatives are doing, which is based on lies and who are doing things which are not normal in moral society.
Over 250,000 people rallied in June, which was believed to be the biggest anti-government protest since the end of communism.
Well, we'll be back with news from the world of business and sports right after this short break. Welcome back. Now in business news, stocks in the United States are trading lower after the prospect of a US-China trade deal. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is trading lower by about 1%, while the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite have shed about 0.33%. In Europe, stock markets are trading negative after reports suggested trade pessimism in Beijing. Frankfurt's DAX index and CAC in Paris have shed about 0.5%, while London's FTSE 100 index made fractional gains. In Asia, stocks jump after Beijing surprised markets by trimming a key interest rate for the first time since 2015. Well, it's 17 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all the news for you, and that's all from me and the team here in Lahore. For the latest updates, don't forget you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.